that is chapter 6 in your textbook. And I was going to give opportunity for questions, but seeing as nobody's joined me, I'm assuming all of you guys are fine in terms of the questions for the assignment. You've looked at the video, the prep video that I made, and you are all happy with that. So I'm going to dive right into Unit 3. I apologize if my voice is slightly off. I've got a bit of bronchitis and so on. And if you suddenly hear the mic going deaf, it's probably mic going dead. It's not you going deaf. It's me shutting it off so I can quickly have a quick cough. If you do have questions regarding the assignment, please feel free to drop me a line. You can see my email address on the screen there. We have got 2 weeks from tonight, I believe, before the due date. And this is not, please guys, go watch the video. This is not one of those assignments you can start doing the night before. It's a tricky assignment. So please, I have uploaded the video. Go onto ARC, go look at the links to the videos, click on that, go watch the video. Do it now. Don't delay, please. Okay, guys, here we go. So the outcomes, there's 4 outcomes for this unit. As always, you need to look at those learning outcomes. In this case, they're nice: define, describe, illustrate, and discuss. I'm not going to read through them. You can work through those on your own. You'd make sure that you can do these various things, because many of these hoops are hoops that come up in not only in the part 1, part 2, but also in the final POE. So the whole idea is we want to develop our customers. We want to look at who and what are our customers. And obviously, if you want to develop your customer, if you want to have a business that's going to be successful, you have to focus on the customer. And it's this focus on the customer has become bigger than ever before. The fact of the matter is this: if you don't have a customer, you don't have a business. It's as simple as that. I don't know of a business that can survive without a customer. Somebody's got to provide the money. Somebody's got to take up your product, your service, or whatever. And it doesn't matter how big or small you are, what resources you have. There are various ways in which you can identify and target your customers, that you can get a sense of how big is the potential market size. How can you understand who's the people that's going to be buying or are buying your products, and why are they buying your products, right? I've spoken about the importance of customers, and it's difficult to say they're more important at the beginning, but they are actually, because if you can get the business up and running and you can have some customers come in there and buy the product, then immediately you have money to do more things with, to develop the business further. But if you've got to carry the business and there's no customers at the initial phases, not only are you going to get dejected, but your bank account's going to start looking really bad. So there's also the difference between the customer and the consumer, and they're not always the same person. The customer is the person who puts money in your pocket. They hand over the money. The consumer is the person who actually uses the product and the service. And it depends who and what. So for example, I stay in a household with a number of people in the household, but I am my internet service provider's customer, right? So I'm the person that's giving them money every month to provide me with an internet signal. The consumers are all the other, myself and all the other people in the house that moan when it's not good enough, or when it's too slow, or something goes wrong and we get it in by satellite and the satellite falls over or whatever. And it's important to distinguish between those two groups, the customer and the consumer, and understand who puts money in your pocket, but also who are the people that have an influence. And we'll talk about the influences and things in a couple of slides. So the relationship between the customer and the market. It's important to understand the market and understand what the market means. So basically, a market is a place where people can sell your goods and services. And that good and services we call the supply. Think of supply and demand if you think about economics way back in first year. And the people who wish to buy is the demand side, right? So a market is basically where we can sell our goods and service, and there's a supply side and a demand side to the market. And I'm going to read this elements of the market, the definition. Market is a set of customers for products or services who have needs or wants and who reference each other when making the buying decision, right? So that's a perfect definition. So firstly, we've got a set of customers. These could be your actual customers. These could be guys that are sitting there now and saying, oh, I'm buying your product and so on. Or they could be potential customers because your business could not, one of two reasons, your business hasn't started yet, or possibly they haven't got interest in the product yet, right? So, and these customers that we talk about, they have a common set of needs or wants. So you can group them together. They are a group. They're not necessarily homogeneous. They don't necessarily look the same. They're not necessarily the same age and so on, but they have a common set of needs or wants. So the commonality, the homogeneousness lies in the fact that they want the same thing, right? And then they reference each other, meaning they speak to each other when they make a buying decision. So there's some way in which they communicate or something that means they all go for the same product eventually. So in this market, we talk about a market opportunity. And the market opportunity is identifiable by the degree of demand for that specific product or application, right? So the opportunity is directly linked to that demand. And we talk about a product application, right? And that's simply just the product is applied to the demand, right? So and this is important. It's the solution to the customer's problem, right? Because remember, if we think back of what we've said in earlier sessions, we've said there must be a problem that you need to solve as an entrepreneur. So, and that problem is something to do with what the customer wants, right? So you're applying the product to their problem. Before you jump into a new venture, you need to do some market research to figure out, will this whole idea that you have, will that actually translate into a successful business? Is it something that you can take and turn this idea into money? Because if you can't turn this idea into money, you don't really have an idea, right? So there's different types of customers, right? I spoke about, and they talk about the chain of customers, right? So instead of just looking at a single customers, you should identify the chain, which is the user, the purchaser, and the influencers. And the user is your consumer, the purchaser is the buyer, is the customer, and then we have influencers. Sometimes the customers may play all three roles, right? If you think about a toys, a company that makes toys, they might think girls between the age of 8 and 9 is the customer, but the purchaser is actually the parent, right? The user is the girl, but the influencers need to be taken into account. They could be the friends, they could be the parents. Who are the people that are saying, listen, my friend, listen, my girl, you need this toy, right? And in this bigger influencer has now become the influencer, what you guys know as influencers, guys that are doing TikToks and stuff like that. But you have to also consider how much influence do those people have, and when you look at the influence that they have, your TikTok guys and all of these, how much influence do they have versus the close friends of a teenage girl, or an 8 or 9-year-old girl is actually the example that I use, not a teenage girl. But who is actually the influencer there? And then we also need to understand that these influences come in different forms, right? there are 5 types of influencers. The end user, right? So this is the person that will actually use the product, and they will influence other people. Remember when we said the definition? We said they have an effect on each other. Then we've got opinion leaders. This is sometimes the biggest influence on success of a service or product. Celebrities and journalists. These are the influencers. Bloggers and all of these stuff. And sometimes they can, depending on the market and depending who it is. There's very few influencers or very few people that I would listen to. But also, I'm older and I come from a different generation. My daughter's son, he's now 17 years. My daughter's son. I'm not that old. My sister's son, he's now 17 years old. And he will not touch something if it's not endorsed by some celebrity or somebody like that. You won't buy something that's not a brand. It doesn't have to be a very well-known brand. It just has to be have well-known people behind it. And then you get the recommenders, people that have got some kind of weight behind them. So they're not influencers. They are people that are experts. So, for example, if I think about my sister's son, he would wear a pair of rugby boots, maybe because some blogger or some guy, sports influencer speaks about it. But if he sees Siya Kolisi wearing that pair of boots, Siya Kolisi would be a recommender because he is an expert, and he then also has that influence because of that. Then you get your economic buyers. These are people who have the ability to buy large scale products. So they're buying for a retail chain or large shopping center or whatever. And then related to them, but above them, are the decision makers, right? So they're similar, but they make the ultimate purchasing decision. They say to the economic buyer, yes, I approve that purchase. And then there's something that's on the side on this diagram, which is the saboteurs, people that speak against your product. And you can't ignore them. And they either speak against your product or they can veto or slow down a process purchasing decision. Now, immediately you would think, okay, so that's the competition. No, it's not. I love the idea of metal detecting. I love the idea to walk possibly an old battlefield or on a beach with a metal detector and see what I can discover. And it's not from yesterday. This has been years. That decision has been, I've not bought one because there is a saboteur. And I happen to be married to that saboteur. And my wife doesn't want me to buy one, right? So that's where the saboteur can be. There can be other people that can be, for instance, the saboteur could be a top importer that's not importing a Nocta machines, which are some of the best metal detectors. So the saboteur for Nocta could be the importer into South Africa. So you have to look at who's the saboteur and how you can deal with the saboteur if you can. Sometimes you won't even be able to deal with that saboteur. Sometimes the saboteur is so far out and so beyond your control. It's in the macro environment. Think about Business Management 1, micro, market, macro. And that if that saboteur is in the macro environment, you can't do anything. There's not much you can do. So obviously, we speak about business models and so on. And the customer segmentation idea is one of the most important building blocks within your business plan or your business model that you're going to roll out. So what we do is when we talk about the customers, we group them together in specific segments. So we say there's our customer base, and we'll look at that just now. There's a customer base, and we take these customer base and we chop it up, and all of these are people that we could possibly do business with. So we want to know their common needs, their common behaviors, their attitudes, and so on. And if when we can do that, Then we can tailor our products around the customer's needs, and make sure that for that segment, we're packaging and selling the product correctly. So there's several ways in which we can divide them up. There's also different influences on it, but let's look at the ways and then we look at the influences in a slide or two. So firstly, their needs validate the offering. In other words, their needs and the offering is aligned. The different segments might have different distribution channels. So one might be buying online, one might be buying from a wholesaler in bulk, and the next one might be buying from a retailer. So it's the same product, but one person is buying it from Takealot. One is going to a wholesaler and buying 50 of these, and the other one is going to retail and buying one of the product. And we need to decide as the entrepreneur, how do we treat these different people, because they're different segments. So do we charge the guy in Takealot a lot less or a lot more? Because actually through Takealot, we're selling to them directly. How do we deal with the guy that's buying 50 of our product? How do we package 50 of our product? Do we package 50 of our product for that segment? And how do we deal with the person that's buying only one product from a retailer? And obviously the relationship then. These different segments call for different types of relationships with them. And the profit margins are also going to be different in different segments. You can think the guy that's buying 50 of our product, if they're buying directly from us, we're going to give them a much better price than the guy in Takealot or the guy in the retail. But we're selling 50 units. And I'd rather make 10% and sell 50 units than make 50% on one unit and only sell the one unit. And then it depends on what the offer is. And they are willing to pay for different aspects of the offer. In other words, they're purchasing it for different reasons because they've got different desires, different needs, etc. So we need to determine who are the customers, what's the demographics, for instance, the age, gender, education, income, and all of those things. And we look at some of those factors on the next slide. Where are they? Where are they located geographically? Are they close to us? Are they far away from us? Do they walk into a store? Do we send to them? What is their behavior? What is their lifestyle? How does that lifestyle behavior relate to what we offer? Does it relate to what we offer? And what is the actual need? Why are they actually buying our product? What is the itch that our product scratches? So there's 6 main ideas when you looking at your customer, and this is a customer or end user profile, and we use those 6 things. You can read them there on the screen and figure. Then I'll speak to each of them. I'm not going to read through them. Demographics, we know age, gender, and all of that. It helps us in terms of creating a broad strokes customer, right? It doesn't help us in terms of pinpointing our customer, but it gives us a broad sense of what our customer looks like. Psychographics, right? This is the psychological attributes, the attitudes, the values, the fears of our end users, or the end users that we're targeting. This starts getting closer to what our customer looks like. And this is something, it's a more detailed overview, and it gives us something to aim at. It gives us something that we can target much more than an age group or something like that. Then proxy products is the products that give you an idea what else the user is likely to buy. So if you've got somebody who is buying a expensive luxury car, they're more likely to buy expensive watches and expensive clothing and expensive perfumes, right? Somebody who drives a cheaper second-hand model car, That's not a target market for our high-level top brand clothing. But if we're selling a mid-level watch, we might target that customer, right? So those are the proxy products that get us closer to our customers. Watering holes, where do these people hang out, right? Where do they meet? Where they swap information? And because this tells us where the word of mouth is going to take place. And this can be a formal thing, such as they can be formally together in a workplace or something like that, or it can be informal. They socialize where the kids are playing sport. They go out to the same type of clubs if you're talking about a younger group. If you're talking about the older group, they belong to the same types of clubs, so they all play bowls together. So it depends what your demographic is, what your psychographic is, maybe even the proxy products. Then you need to think a day in the life. It's an easy way to figure out your customer. Try to walk in their shoes for a day. And this is particularly useful if you've narrowed it down and you've got a better sense of who these people are. Then this walking or spending a day in the life, at you being able to then from the day in the life understand the customer better is easier. And then the last one is the fears and motivators. What keeps them awake at night? Why will they not fall asleep? What worries them, right? And what do they really want to achieve? And what is it that they would do to achieve what they really want to achieve? And those two are two very, very strong pullers and pushers of products, pulling towards or pushing away from products, depending if you're dealing with the biggest fear or the biggest motivator. So something that we can do as well is a customer journey map. Now that's a whole process. Now what I've done is I've put together a learning pack for you on the customer journey mapping process. I would suggest that you go have a look at that. There's a whole stack of things. I think there's a video, there's some readings, I think there's a recording in there and so on as well. If you go onto ARC and you click on the subject and you go to Learning Unit 3, Theme 1, Customer Development, and then you'll find the learning pack, the customer journey mapping process. Click on that and you'll see the documents and stuff in there. I'm not going to deal with this, right? Except for saying that a customer journey map is basically it focuses on the buyer's experience, right? It's a visual representation of the customer's experience while they are interacting with your business. And it's across various touch points. And it allows us to identify something that we call pain points. And pain points are the things that customers don't enjoy. And if you can identify the pain points and you can solve the pain points, then you can have a much more empathetic view of your customer, because you've got a clear picture of the customer interaction. You understand what the customer thinks about your product, and it confirms the journey that the customer walks with your product. So it gives you a good sense of what happens to the customer during that outlook, during their interaction with your product. So please go look through the journey mapping process. It is important. It comes up later in one of the assignments, if I'm not mistaken. And the sooner you understand it, the better, because it's also not something, that you'll easily grasp, and that's why I've put together a complete learning pack on that, separate from the normal things that we do, as opposed to the abnormal, just the things we do. So now you need to size your market. Now I've put that graph in, it's similar to the one in your textbook. And those of you that are currently dealing with research and have grappled with population would understand there's various sizes of population. Things like the population, the accessible population, the target population, and so on. And this is very similar to that. So there's a total available market, right? The complete market out there. And remember, what we're trying to do is we're trying to size the market because we want to figure out what we can do, right? So just looking at the graph initially, there's this total market out there. There's a market that we can service, and then there's a share of the market, right? And we want to look at these markets because that can tell us what is our target size, and this then we can translate into a share of the market, which we then can translate into money, which we can then translate into what we can use as a launch market, which we can then translate into how much money will the investors give us. Because remember, eventually we want to use this as part of the investors, or even to attract new employees. Say, this is where we're going. And there's the TAM, the SAM, and the SOM, right? The total available market, the serviceable available market, and the share of market, or the SOM. Now, to explain this, the total market is obvious. It's all the market that's possible for your product. So let's say, for example, we want to open a key cutting business. I'm situated on the West Coast, so I'm going to open a key cutting business, guys that physically make keys, duplicate keys. So if I want to look at the total available market, my total available market is the whole of the West Coast, including probably the Northern Cape, the Swartland, and then going down towards the Cape Peninsula. Can I service those? Can I open branches everywhere? No, I can't. So what's my serviceable available market? My serviceable available market is a region of the West Coast. And I will judge that region to be, say, Saldanha, Langebaan, and Eiserfontein. Right. Now, that doesn't matter. You don't have to grab a map book or something. But geographically speaking, that's an area of probably a strip of about 50 k's along the West Coast. That's an area I can service. However, looking at my the portion of the market I'm likely realistic to be able to reach, Saldanha is a larger town, and they've got a very big town called Vredenburg up the road from them. Langebaan is a hub, and there are lots of places there already. So my share of market, I will target Eiserfontein. That share of market will give me the whole of Eiserfontein because nobody does key cutting on Eiserfontein. However, there are 2 hardware stores in Eiserfontein. And when they find out that I'm opening a key cutting store, they might decide to do the same. And then my share of market might shrink. Because then where I have the whole share of Eiserfontein as my market, I will probably then only have 1/3 share of a market. And this will influence the launch market that I have, right? Because if I know that I have a launch market or niche, a group of customers that I can launch the product to, and I can grab them. So what I will do is I will go to establish those launch customers. I will go to Eiserfontein with my key cutting business, and I will go to all the builders, all the handymen, and say to them, guys, how's it? I'm new in town. I cut keys. If you have got a house, and the estate agents as well, if you've got a house that you're renovating or building and you need keys, I'm the guy. I'll give you a special price. Estate agents, there's only one front door key to the house that you're going to sell. Do it as a service to your customer. Come see me. You're going to be a regular customer. I'll give you a good price. And then also through that, I'm hoping that they will then recommend me to the people that they deal with, the owner of the house that they're renovating, right? The person who the estate agent is selling the house to. So those are the type of people that I'll then try to get as my launch market. Because once I've got that customer base, right, I can then go to my investors and say to them, guys, how's it? I have these customers, right? And those people will then be able to invest in my company, give me money to start my company and to run my company. And we up and rolling. So market sizing is similar to the customer segments. How big is that customer segment? What's the buying power? Who are the customers in that segment? Can I access them? And the stability, right? So how big is it? Literally, how many people are there? So for my example in Eiserfontein, how many house owners are there in Eiserfontein? That typically would be my ultimate goal. I want all the house owners to be my guests. So I'll go to the municipality and I need to figure out how many houses are there in Eiserfontein, because each one of those houses are owned by somebody or rented by somebody, right? What's the buying power? How much money have these guys got? Can I offer a premium service where I simply go in and replace the locks? Or is it just going to be a key cutting service? So, and are there then these customers, can they then be chopped into different segments? Is it possible to say that these customers are different segments, right? Or are they simply just one grouping of people? Because that's also something we want to know. Because if, remember, and I've already actually spoken to segments, because your estate agent could be a segment, and your handyman could be a segment, and your builder could be a segment. Or you could say those three are my large-scale customers, right? The individual household are my small-scale customers, and then I can speak to my business customers as well. How accessible is my customers? How am I going to speak to my customer? Is there a way that I can get to them? Can I drop flyers in their post boxes? There's no postal delivery in Eiserfontein, so very few people have post boxes. So that's out. So I've got to find a local radio station, or I've got to put up a stall somewhere to propagate this, or I must find a way. And then how stable is your customer segment? Are these people there for the long haul? And in Eiserfontein, the customer segment is not going to be very stable. It's a holiday town, so ownership of houses goes quite quick. You've got what we call the bakkie builders coming in, guys, and everybody who's got a bakkie and a spade is a builder, and they come in and they mess up and they get a bad reputation and they leave. So I must also realize my customer segment isn't very stable, and that tells me that I'm going to have to keep on looking at what my segment looks like now, and in 6 months I must look at that segmentation again. But also I'm going to have to keep on doing promotions to hang on to the segments that I have, and that I don't lose these segments because the segment becomes unstable and moves on and moves away. So why is market sizing important? Why do I need to know all these things? Well, for starters, we can calculate sales and profit. Because if we know how many people we have, we can estimate the sales, and from sales we can calculate turnover, and from turnover we can calculate profits. So hopefully you understand turnover and profits, the difference between the two. And that's why we want to have a look at that. Looking at these, we can identify where we can grow if we put in new product lines or new customer segments, right? So with my, I'm just a key cutting business, but I might start selling locks, and from locks to safes is not a big jump, right? And if I'm doing locks and safes, I might want to do other security products like burglar proofing, cameras, alarms. So all of those are growth opportunities for my company. If I know my segments, I know where the competitive threats are and how to develop strategies to counter those threats. So I've already identified that when I said there are 2 hardware stores, and hardware stores could also easily become key cutters. So I need to be able to be a more specialized service. And in expanding my business, as I just mentioned, into more security products, I might be able to look at that. Then exit strategies. What am I going to do to exit? In other words, sell my business? Or what if these hardwares become such a big threat? How do I pivot the business and take the business in a different direction? Or am I simply going to build the business up to a point and then exit in any case and sell it? I'm just building it until there's enough customers, because I'm a serial entrepreneur. What are the market trends? What's happening? So in Eiser, for example, Eiser is going more and more upscale. So one needs to look at more innovative locking mechanisms, things like electronic locks, remote control locks, voice activate locks, locks that you can activate with your cell phone by tapping your cell phone against the lock. And all of this, we then take together as a package of proof to our investors. And we say to our investors, this is the things that I can offer you. And therefore, that's why you're going to give me some money. So, to calculate the market size, we define the segment, we conduct top-down market sizing or a bottom-up analysis. Now, we've spoken about the defining the segment, so I'm not going to go into that, but the top-down involves determining the total market and then estimating your share of the market. So how many people are there in the total? How many of those people do I think I'm going to be able to target? Bottom-up rather looks at what are my sales going to be. So how many units do I think, how many keys do I think I'm going to cut per day, per week, per month? And work from that then to come to a number. And sanity checks, guys, and I can't reiterate sanity checks enough times. Your business that you're going to talk about in your assignment, do your own sanity check on that and say, am I being crazy? When you start estimating, because at some stage you're going to, later on, you're going to start talking money. And then students tell me they're going to make 15 million Rand in the first year. And I just laugh and I think, you know, if there was a business that we could make 15 million in the first year, and yes, it happens to some businesses, but it's not every business that's going to do that. As a matter of fact, most businesses fail in the first year. So you've got to make sure that your calculations are correct, that you know that you're going to have some kind of thing. If you're saying, look, I'm going to target cyclists in the US, and I'm going to target the 350 million cyclists, but the US has only got a population of 300 million, men, women, children, everybody. Then you have a problem. But the problem becomes more acute when as they say, the devil is in the detail, right? When I say, okay, I'm going to cut 800 keys a year. Well, there's 1,600 houses in Azefontein. So I'm going to, every second house is going to have at least one key cut per year. Is that realistic? Or am I going to say I'm going to do 800 keys because every house has an average 10 keys, and they build 5 new houses every year, every month in Azefontein, and that's already 50 keys. Times 12 months is 600 keys. 800 keys, the other 200 keys are the odds and sods who come in who broke a key, lost a key, whatever. Suddenly my numbers become realistic. My sanity check has worked out. And then, yeah, lastly, you've got to check your competition. Always keep your eyes on the competition. What will their next move be? And counter that. So guys, that's what I've got to say about knowing your customer and figuring out how to approach your customer. Once you've listened through the recording, please let me know if you have any questions. Please drop me a note. Say to me, how's it, Carl? This is it. Please just remember, when you do drop me a note, an email, try to, in the subject line, just mention that you entrepreneurship 3A or ENTP 7311, I think is the code. Just anything like that, just to give an indication, because I teach a number of classes and it's sometimes difficult to answer the question in the context of the class. Please, please, please go listen to the recording I did about the assignment. There's 2 weeks left. You need to start cracking on that assignment. It's not something that you can do in a day or two. There's a lot of hoops to jump through, and some of them are going to take some time. Okay, guys, I bid you good night. Thank you very much. Cheers.